Howdy, y'all! Today we are going to talk about some English language terms, some literary devices that you might want to be familiar with as you write. So one of my favorite classes in high school was AP English Language. Basically, the class was all about persuasion, how we use the English language and how we manipulate it to persuade people. Whether we are persuading someone to take our side on a social issue or persuading them to believe in our fictional story, we are using a lot of literary devices in our writing. It may be one of those things that you're not even aware of as you're reading and you're writing. I've learned a lot about these devices and I still don't always notice them. Probably all have that moment in a book that we're reading or writing where a phrase is just turned perfectly so that it has two meanings, or the writer foreshadows to something that happens later in the book. You could definitely be a reader or writer and never know the names for these terms. But I think that they are important to know because they help us be conscious of what we're reading and writing. You also might come across these terms from beta readers, reviewers, editors, agents, and it's important to know what they're talking about. So I'm going to do this in two parts, this week and then the next time that I have Wordplay Wednesday, so that should be in about 6 weeks. This week I'm going to talk about literary devices that are directly related to the language and the writing itself. Next time we will talk about literary devices that have more to do with the content of the story and the development of the story. So on the very lowest level of your writing, you have diction. Diction is very simply your word choice. Generally, it's important to have a more complex diction as opposed to a really simple one. This means not using the same word to describe everything. Like if all your characters are shocked or they sigh a lot. But there are other aspects of diction that can have more to do with what you're writing and who you're writing it for. Like if you are writing a scientific paper, you're probably going to be using a lot of big scientific words. If you are writing a fantasy book, you might be making up words. If you are writing a middle grade book and using huge words that people with college educations don't learn, it might be the wrong word choice. You have to be aware of what level of diction will be best for your audience. Something else you have to be aware of with your word choice is your characters and your setting. With your characters, you have to be aware of two other literary devices that fall under diction, which are colloquialisms and slang. These are words and phrases that aren't considered proper English, and in the case of colloquialisms, they might not make literal sense. But you have to know what colloquialisms and what slang words your character would use. For instance, if you're writing a character from the Bronx and they are using proper English the whole time, it might not be very believable. Or if you're writing about a character in Texas and they're using words like pop and use guys, I might assume that you're from New Jersey and have never met someone from Texas. Other things to be aware of with your word choice are things like connotation and denotation. Denotation is the dictionary definition of a word. Connotation is an implied meaning of a word. You might find a word in the thesaurus, look it up in the dictionary, know exactly what it means, and think it's an appropriate word to use. There might be connotations to that word that aren't so appropriate for the way you're using them. Connotation can also be used to your advantage. For example, if you have a character that's scared of everything, and he has a confrontation with a witch who turns him into a chicken, then that's funny because we all know the connotation of chicken. One of my favorite literary terms, because I like to say it, is onomatopoeia. Onomatopoeia is using words that imitate sounds, so it's like saying boom! Think of your stereotypical superhero comic with your boom, crash, slap. Once you move beyond diction, you move on to syntax, which is your sentence structure. Like with diction, you want to have variety in your sentence structure. If your story goes a little bit like this, he got in the car, he went to the grocery store, he bought vegetables. The story starts to sound a little bit like a picture book. And if you're writing a picture book, that's great. But if you're writing anything beyond that, you want to have a combination of simple and complex sentences. I know this is something I have a really bad habit of. I tend to write a lot of sentences that go like this. He got in the car, whistling, twinkle twinkle little star. He went to the grocery store, hoping he would see that girl he had a crush on. These are things you want to be aware of. What level is your syntax at? What sentence structures do you use a lot and how can you switch them up? A couple of cool literary terms that you use in syntax are asyndeton and polysyndeton. Asyndeton is when you leave out conjunctions that should be there. This is like the famous phrase, vini, vivi, vici. I came, I saw, I conquered. On the other side, polysyndeton would be if you said, I came, and I saw, and I conquered. Asyndeton and polysyndeton can be fun ways to add some variety to your sentence structures. And when you're using a structure that's different than conventional English, I came, I saw, and I conquered, it adds an extra impact. There are also cool sentence structures like balanced sentences. A balanced sentence has two parts that parallel each other. For example, if we said, Katniss is scared of President Snow's power, and President Snow is scared of Katniss's influence. That is a balanced sentence. It shows a really cool parallel of how both characters fear the other character's power and influence. And that is all I have for you today. I think this video is getting a little bit lengthy, so I'm gonna go. Like I said, with these terms, it's not important that you have them memorized so that your literary agent can quiz you on them one day. They're important to know so that you can be conscious of how you're using them. Polysyndeton can be really cool and have a great impact when used sparingly, but if every other sentence is and, or, it's going to get really old really fast. Don't forget about our live chat this Sunday at 7:30 Eastern Time, and until then, have a great rest of the week.